I understand about the practice in India, but when it comes to German practice, I mean, practicing homeopathy in Germany, were there any hurdles that you faced, or were there any licensing requirements, any statutory requirement, government licensing? If you could just help us through with the list.
I like to call them mountains. They're not just hurdles. And this is a question I get asked practically a couple of times every week by prospective homeopaths who want to practice in Germany, Germany being the birthplace of homeopathy. Well, I have good news and not so good news. So each state has slightly different rules, but by and large, they're the same. You answer this exam, which is in German. It is an MCQ form. And again, as an Indian, I thought, MCQs, no problem. Big problem. They are not straightforward questions. So I make it a point that for all my German cases that are attached, especially to this clinic, that I will see them in person. Either I will make a house call or they will come over and I will treat that way, which is something that is not so strict at all in India. They have been trying to cut funding for homeopathy, which is actually such a small fraction of the healthcare spending. It doesn't really make a difference. And a couple of years before I moved, there was a huge wave of trying to get homeopathy into the universities, which unfortunately did not work. I'm part of an organization called Campus in Germany that does a lot of research. We have one research project still ongoing with the Bhopal Homeopathic Medical College in India. There are certain stem cell researches that are going on. It's not concluded yet. But in my opinion, this is the way forward because there's no convincing the policy makers.
Welcome all to another episode of HomeoMitra Vaartalap, and today we have with us a very special guest all the way from Germany, Dr. Nicola Coutinho. Welcome, Dr. Nicola. Dr. Nicola is a homeopathic doctor and she's a practicing homeopath since quite some time. So, before we start, Dr. Nicola, if you could just tell us something about yourself, about your homeopathic practice, how long have you been practicing, and the locations where you've been practicing on.
Thank you, Dr. Keyur. So I'm a homeopath from Goa. I studied homeopathy at Father Muller's in Mangalore. I did both my BHMS and my MD there, after which I started a practice in Goa, which I still continue today, virtually and in person. So I've been a practicing homeopath since 2013 when I finished my MD. And 2015, I moved to Germany for love. And eventually, I also started my practice here, which we will get into. And as of now, I see to it that I practice homeopathy and I add a healthy bit of nutrition, including lactation, into my practices, both in India and in Germany.
Wonderful. Very, very nice to know that. If you could tell us your motivation of taking up homeopathy as medical practice, how was the journey so far, and why did you take up this particular subject of practice?
So at 16 years of age, as most of us are, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I just had a lot of options. I was a very active basketball player. I liked journalism. I used to read a lot. I loved detective novels. I liked the idea of medicine. And it was at this point of time that my parents came in contact with a homeopath from Tamil Nadu, Father Brito, who used to come to different places in India and organize naturopathy courses, basic first aid homeopathy courses. And I used to be there as a bored teenager because my parents used to help him organize. And at some point, I got interested in what this man was saying. And I started paying more attention and realized, this sounds like a coming together of a lot of my interests. Maybe I'll give it a try. And that's what I did because I knew homeopathy through my family. My family came to it when I was 3 years old because I had terrible middle ear infections, and that was the only therapy that helped. So it was a therapy that was already familiar to my family. And I decided to pursue it because for me, it felt like a coming together of all my interests. And I have absolutely no regrets. It fulfills me, and I'm very passionate about what I do.
Quite an inspiring story that you have, and yes, that motivation definitely helps taking it forward to treating your patients with the same kind of zeal when it comes to treating with homeopathy. So, Dr. Nicola, if you could just tell us about why did you start your practice in Germany?
So as I said, mine is like a classic story of boy meets girl. I met my now husband 14 years ago in a train in Goa. And it took a while until we decided to get together. I moved here with the condition that I would continue practicing. And if I did not find a way to practice, we would leave because that was not an option for me. I kept my Goan clinic running. At the time in 2015, nobody knew what was an online consultation. I had a lot of flashback from my patients who didn't understand it, didn't like it. But come Corona, I was at an advantage because I already had the setup of virtual consultations. And when I moved to Germany, for me, not working as a homeopath was simply not an option because for me, it's like living and breathing. It had to be part of my life. So once I moved here, it took a while, but I figured my way around the bureaucracy, the language requirements, and set up my practice here in 2018 when my son was about 8 months old. And since then, I have been running both clinics.
I understand about the practice in India, but when it comes to German practice, I mean, practicing homeopathy in Germany, were there any hurdles that you faced, or were there any licensing requirements, any statutory requirement, government licensing? If you could just help us through with the list.
I like to call them mountains. They're not just hurdles. And this is a question I get asked practically a couple of times every week by prospective homeopaths who want to practice in Germany, Germany being the birthplace of homeopathy. Well, I have good news and not so good news. The good news is that, okay, it originated here. There is a market for it. There is definitely a need for homeopaths, and Indian homeopaths are very highly valued in Germany because of our education system. But it is very difficult to start your practice if you do not know the language, number one. It's an absolute must. Yes, there are lots of places in Germany like Hamburg, where I'm based, which is very metropolitan, so you can get by with English. But if you want to practice a relatively intermediate to advanced knowledge of German is one of your first requirements. So if you know the language models, A1 is the most basic. That's where you would say your name, ask for the time, very, very basic stuff. And C2, so there's A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. C2 is native level German. Now, what you need to practice as a homeopath is somewhere between B1 and B2. The second thing to know is that Indian degrees are not accepted here. They are not accepted as medical degrees and they are not accepted as homeopathic degrees for several reasons. Number one is that Germany does not teach homeopathy at the university level. So even though you go through the process, which I did, of trying to get my degrees recognized here, they have nothing to compare it to. So there is no comparable homeopathic degree in Germany. So it is not recognized. Now, there are two ways you can go forward to practice as a homeopath. Number one, you go through the whole process of getting recognized as a medical doctor. And this would be as an allopath. Okay, conventional medicine is what it is called here. So you get recognized as an allopath by way of sending all your papers to the concerned authorities, having them check for the hours you've put in, and then most likely they will tell you what is missing, because like in homeopathy, for example, we don't study pharmacology. So whatever semesters and subjects they feel are missing from your education, you are required to go back to university and do it. And then you have to pass two exams. One exam is a language exam of medical German, which is a C1 level. I'm smiling because this brings back some very terrifying memories where I was ready to pack my suitcase and go back to India because medical German was very, very difficult. So this exam you can attempt as many times as you like, the language exam, the medical German exam. And then there is the state exam to practice as a doctor. This exam may only be attempted twice. If you fail on the second attempt, you cannot practice as a doctor, full stop. This is one way. The second way to practice as a homeopath is to practice as what is called a Heilpraktiker. Heilpraktiker, the term literally means healing practitioner. So you're practicing homeopathy, but as a non-medical doctor. which is what I decided to do, because after spending 8.5 years in college in India, I was not willing to go back to university, and I kept getting no's. I just wanted to start practicing. And after 2 years, I was done. I wanted to start my practice. So with this Heil Praktika way, what you do is you have to answer a written exam, and you have to go through a oral exam. The written exam covers your knowledge of anatomy, physiology, medicine, and most importantly, the laws, because there are certain laws for non-medical practitioners that you have to know, and they really grill you on these laws. So this exam may be attempted by anybody basically who has a high school degree and who is a resident of Germany or wherever you're staying. So each state has slightly different rules, but by and large, they're the same. You answer this exam, which is in German. It is an MCQ form. And again, as an Indian, I thought, MCQs, no problem. Big problem. They are not straightforward questions. They're very complicated, and you just have about 2 minutes per question to, kind of understand it. The content itself for me was not difficult. The problem was to have the questions in German, because we know the content is not a problem. It's like understanding the question and figuring out what exactly is asked is the bigger issue. So once you pass the written exam, then you get invited into the oral exam. The oral exam is conducted usually by two medical doctors and two Heil practickers. They may or may not be homeopaths. So in the oral exam, again, it depends from state to state. They will ask you questions to kind of ascertain how competent you are in your field, and most importantly, to make sure that you are not a threat to the health of society. This is so they will ask you like what diseases you're not allowed to treat. There is a whole list of infectious diseases that as a homeopath, as a non-medical practitioner in Germany, you're not allowed to treat, like measles, for example, or chickenpox. So these are rules that you have to know, and they will ask you. Once you clear this, then you get a permit to practice homeopathy everywhere in Germany. You are not bound to the state in which you passed your exam. You may practice anyway. So these are the two options. In fact, because I get this question so often, I have created one Facebook group called Indian Homeopaths in Germany, where I have listed all these points. So anyone who's interested can come and read, and then I sit down and discuss their individual cases with them.
That is quite detailed, interesting, but at the same time, one thing I always figure out is when you want to practice, you will find a way to practice, is what I've understood from this discussion. Although, I mean, the statutory requirements from what you said are quite stringent, but perhaps for a reason. And yes, if we are able to crack them, should not be a problem when it comes to practice. What are the type of cases that one are very rampant over there when it comes to treating, particularly with homeopathic medication, or let's say in general, and the type of cases that you have been treating in your practice?
So what is already known about Germany is that they have an aging population. And also it's the older generation very often that knows a lot about homeopathy because they grew up in households that knew homeopathy in some way or the other. So we get a lot of geriatric health issues. We get people with a lot of bone issues. Very interestingly, Germany has a high number of autoimmune conditions, especially thyroid. So there are lots of Hashimoto cases. There is also a considerable amount of multiple sclerosis. And this is in addition to the ever expanding number of allergic cases, which I see in my practice in India also, and with patients based elsewhere in the world. Specific to Germany is also the younger generation, parents, new parents who come with their children because they don't necessarily want to go the allopathic way and want to find natural health solutions, or they have been told by the allopaths that there's nothing else that can be done. So, the usual mnemonic of teeth, tried everything else, now try homeopathy. So we get that backlog of cases that is hopeless and doesn't know where to go. Since the pandemic, what I've also noticed is a very large number of cases in depression, especially in the younger age group. My theory, I could be wrong, is Also, because so much of social isolation existed, young people simply did not develop the skills to socially communicate and express their needs with other people. And I find this is the biggest subset that is suffering. And of course, as every homeopath, I get a lot of skin cases, a lot of respiratory, asthma, lung issues. Yeah, so that about sums up the type of cases I get in Germany.
If you could just share the challenges that you face when it comes to giving homeopathic medicine or treating the patient with homeopathy.
So in Germany, as per the law, you're not allowed to dispense your own medicines, unlike in India. Your patient has to be given a prescription and they're supposed to take it from the pharmacy. What at the most, what you're allowed to do is to give a dose in the clinic, not more. So that is something that I, as an Indian homeopath who would make my own powder doses and my little vials, had to get used to different method of practice over here. Also have to be very careful about what diseases I say I treat or I don't treat, because there is always the possibility that somebody complains. Like always, there is some amount of lashback against alternative healthcare practitioners. So I have to make sure that I safeguard myself with how I practice. There is another rule for Heilpraktikers in Germany, that you're not allowed to just practice, online, or not see your patients in person unless there is a specific reason why. Let's say the person is too old or they're too sick and they're unable to come to the clinic, then yes. So I make it a point that for all my German cases that are attached, especially to this clinic, that I will see them in person. Either I will make a house call or they will come over and I will treat that way, which is something that is not so strict at all in India, right? You are at your own liberty to decide how you formulate your consultations. But of course, whether it's India or Germany, I lay huge value on seeing my patients in flesh and blood, because as great as technology is, it cannot replace seeing somebody in person and really feeling them for who they are sitting opposite you, right? Also in Germany, things work way more structured than in India, which has advantages and disadvantages. So I would know my calendar already for the next 1.5, 2 months, probably in advance here. It's very difficult sometimes to convince people that I'm Indian. It's okay. You can call me. If I have a slot free, I will take you today. Not a problem. Because I will get people calling and apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry, but do you have an appointment in the next 2 weeks? Of course, I have an appointment. I'll fit you in. Not an issue. But this would never work in India. I cannot pre-schedule patients for so many weeks and months in advance. Will not happen. So for me, it is a nice game of being in between cultures, between languages, also how I deal with the patients. In India, I will get one woman coming and 6 family members with her explaining her symptoms to me. Here, sometimes I have 13, 14-year-old child who will tell the parent, can you please wait outside for me? I want to speak. Okay, so these are things that I also had to learn because I come from a different culture. But as I probably mentioned, my husband is German, so our son is half Indian and half German. I am trying to take the best of both cultures, and both cultures have wonderful things to offer.
As I understand, you have a clinic or some sort of a consulting space cabin in Germany. That's how you are seeing patients over there, right?
Yes, I have a space in Hamburg where we share the space, the consulting space, with other homeopaths. There are also 2 physiotherapists. There's somebody else who does like counseling. So we share the space. We don't have one clinic, but we share the space, and it's a nice atmosphere because you can always talk to a colleague. And if I'm stuck with a case, I can always say, look, I'm not getting further with this case. Could you please take it over or supervise or give me an idea? That is something I've really enjoyed here. There is not so much of, okay, my patient, I just keep it with me. But no, okay, if it's not working, it's not working. I'll send it to you, and vice versa. I also get referrals from my colleagues where they feel the patient will be better with me. And also, what we offer here, which I don't have in India yet, is we do like a weekend service, because here in Germany, time is sacred. People really protect their weekend. So if you're not working, you're not working. Your phone is off. You're not reachable. It's not the same in India. I understand. Most of the time you're available 24/7. So here on the weekend, if patients need to have an emergency consultation, an urgent prescription, we're a group of about 7 of us, and we have one very old Nokia telephone which has a number, and the patients know, okay, on the weekend for 2 hours on the day, they can call the number and somebody will answer. They don't know which homeopath, which of us, but we take it in turns, so everybody will do, a duty maybe once or twice a month or once in 2 months, and that way you also get used to other patients. You kind of fill in for other people. So if you're going on holiday, you're not taking your phone with you, your colleague will do substitution for you. So that is something that I really enjoy having over here, which in India is not always practical. It's different. There's no better or worse, it's just different.
I agree, and this is quite a cultural contrast that we see. But yeah, that's how it is, perhaps. Are there any homeopathy colleges in Germany which give this kind of certification from? Because from what you just said, you all you need to do is pass the exam, which is conducted by the German government. So, but then are there any certifying colleges or institutes, or maybe some colleges which would have a course on natural medicine, and then eventually they will give you specialization in homeopathy?
Yes, there are several institutes. They're not called colleges. They do like what is the equivalent of a diploma course in India. And I teach at one of the last surviving schools of homeopathy in Hamburg. We are now 5 teachers on the team. And what we offer is a 3 year course, which is now hybrid after Corona. So every week, the students have an online class, and for 6 weekends in the year, that is 12 days total, they come and spend 8 hours together with us, and we do teaching in person. So there are lots of institutes, unfortunately, becoming less and less like this all over Germany, also since Corona. And as I said, the population is aging. And a couple of years ago, I used to make a joke saying we need to import Indian homeopaths so we can meet the demand. And now I think it's no longer a joke because honestly, I'm the youngest in all my colleagues, all my students, and I'm not so young anymore. I've been in Germany for 10 years. The average age of my students is about 50 plus, 50 or 60 plus, which in its own way is beautiful, teaching people that have already had so much of life experience. Like currently in my course, I have an anesthesiologist, I have physiotherapists, I have pharmacists. So they're coming from a medical, a paramedical or medical background or no medical background, but they're also coming with so much of life experience. So, when I was teaching in India, and I still do hold webinars and talks and lectures because I love doing that. It's a completely different dynamic when you're teaching 18, 20-year-olds and you're teaching 50 plus people that have this thirst for homeopathy and are coming with their own set of knowledge, their own life experience to the table.
I gathered two things from this. One is, and I always used to feel that what kind of activism would be needed to get homeopathy into mainstream, especially in the Western countries. Because in India now it is managed by the government. The regulation, there is a regulation for education, there is a regulation for practice, and it is all taken care of by the central government. There is fund allocation, there are programs which are now running. Uh, and therefore, I always feel that when the younger population gets inducted into the education, it's always better. But then the contrast which you just mentioned is that when you come with a certain amount of life experience, which now at my age I realize is necessary for the homeopath to actually have a very good homeopathy practice. When I say good, means a very satisfying homeopathy practice. Because imagine a 25-year-old dealing with a patient who is 50-year-old and having, let's say, any XYZ issue. Okay. But being homeopaths, we understand life dynamics, we understand dynamics of behavior, emotions, dreams, etc. A 25-year-old would not be so equipped to understand that. Perhaps I'm not saying all of them would not be, but if I recall myself, if I talk about myself, when I recall that, I may not have been equipped as much. Now at this age, I'm equipped to deal with that. So this is a fine balance, which I don't know if there is a solution to this, but yes, I just wanted to make this point that there are two fine ends to homeopathy practice, the younger generation versus the older generation. However, that being said, is there any sort of activism actually going on in Germany or some sort of lobbying, perhaps, by the homeopathic community to actually develop more colleges, more education, getting younger generation into the homeopathic education?
So there is a constant lobbying. Unfortunately, the policymakers are not so involved in it right now. If you've seen the German news, they have bigger problems. They have been trying to cut funding for homeopathy, which is actually such a small fraction of the healthcare spending. It doesn't really make a difference. And a couple of years before I moved, there was a huge wave of trying to get homeopathy into the universities, which unfortunately did not work. But there is a constant effort from people who are in the research field. I have a couple of colleagues who are also in the research field who are using research papers to bring homeopathy forward. And I think, honestly, that is the only way forward. If you've heard of Dr. Michael Frass from Austria, he's done fabulous oncology studies to such an extent that even though the German cancer societies were dead against homeopathy, they have accepted his paper on homeopathy for palliation. And now homeopathy stands as one of the alternative options for cancer patients for palliation within this German organization that actually detests homeopathy. So there's a lot of backdoor stuff happening from different ends. I'm part of an organization called Campace in Germany that does a lot of research. We have one research project still ongoing with the Bhopal Homeopathic Medical College in India. There are certain stem cell researches that are going on. It's not concluded yet. But in my opinion, this is the way forward because there's no convincing the policymakers. What we are also doing is we are approaching insurance companies to look at longitudinal studies of patients who have been on homeopathy and what is their ultimate cost on the healthcare system because money talks. And in Germany, unlike in India, it is compulsory that everybody has a healthcare insurance. So the data for healthcare insurance exists for every single person over decades of their whole life. So the process that we are in at the moment is trying to get insurance companies using a model that we're still developing to take a look at this longitudinal snapshot of everybody to see we are not doing the same, they are doing the same, to see if it's bringing any sort of benefit to the healthcare cost. We're not talking anything else because some of the insurance companies have already produced papers where they've shown that there have been less sick days for people who are on alternative therapies like homeopathy. And this gets the attention of policymakers. So, this is one way in which a large part of the German homeopathic population is kind of trying to move forward.
When you just spoke about Dr. Frass and his research, it just feels so sad that none of this gets covered into mainstream media. Except for this one research which was recently covered. I think there was one doctor in Hyderabad who had done that study on, the efficacy of homeopathy in pediatric age group up to 2 years, comparing that with modern medicine. I don't know why. I mean, this benefits people so much, but then at the same time, it doesn't get covered in the mainstream media. But then at the same time, it is heartening to know that people are actually having a look at its, financial viability when it comes to the counterpart.
Yeah, I believe there's always going to be hope, no matter how terrible the current scenario is. There are homeopaths in Australia, for example, Dr. Isaac Golden, who's done wonderful work on vaccinations in the pediatric age group and comparison between vaccinated and unvaccinated kids. There is another homeopath, I think she's based in Melbourne now, who has started her own school of homeopaths, and she has over hundreds of applications, which in itself is such a big hope. And these are all young families. So they are grown adults, they're not younger people. And as we discussed, there is a certain advantage to coming to homeopathy at a later date. So there's always hope. Even in Germany, I see a lot of people saying, oh no, the insurance is not covering it. But you always have that percentage of people that are so convinced with what homeopathy has to offer them. They will keep coming, including a large part of the expat population. I have so many Indian patients here that make me so happy. And they'll say, my grandfather was Bengali. We used to have homeopathy in the house all the time. Or, I grew up with these little pills. I didn't know what they were, but now I want my child to have it because I know there is an advantage. So I truly believe that homeopathy, alternative healthcare systems, they are the future of tomorrow because they are not under the capitalistic thumb, so to say.
Indeed, encouraging. Another tangential question which I sort of, thought of asking you is, do the allopathic doctors over there come for homeopathic treatment to the
Yes.
homeopath?
Yes, I have several doctors, dentists under my care. They bring their children. Usually, they come with a child first. And once they're convinced with the treatment of the child, same holds true in India, then they come by themselves and slowly they'll bring the whole family. And I've even had certain medical doctors here, allopaths, tell me, I joined medicine because I wanted to help people. And I'm so disillusioned now because that's one of the last things I'm doing. I'm just helping the big companies make money for themselves. And then they see again the value in homeopathy. And to answer your question, yes, they come.
Wow. I feel very happy that it's homeopathy is actually, not just existing, but it's kind of now, from whatever little experience I've had with interaction with so many homeopaths, uh, that it's thriving now, especially in the Western countries, because in the countries it has always been a challenge. Because at a point of time, what I understood is that there were no new admissions in colleges. Okay, those who were doing homeopathy were probably doing it as a second or third job on weekends. But then with this changing scenario, it looks like there is, hope in the future.
Yes, there is. I mean, of course, there are people who have homeopathy as their second and third job or as a hobby. But I believe we also need these people because they are the ones who talk and, spread it to others. And unlike India, it is not so easy here to make your living 100% from homeopathy. I'm one of the few people that exclusively practices homeopathy and nothing else. But I have colleagues that need to supplement their income. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I think the important thing is that everybody is working for the future of homeopathy and it's getting more and more awareness, more and more traction.
Great. So for those of you who are doing homeopathy practice just on the weekends, or maybe you are having a main job, even in India that is the case. It is not that in India we have people who are, only practicing homeopathy. Like I'll tell you, for me, for myself, I do social media as well as I do homeopathy. But then I don't know, something within homeopathy does not let me say, let me quit. Never has it once been that, okay, I will stop homeopathy. I mean, I have had thoughts where I would say I would stop doing social media and get into full-time homeopathy practice. But not once have I had that thought that I stop homeopathy practice and do the other stuff. I don't know. That's the power that homeopathy wields on all of us.
I think once you're convinced, you're convinced. Then there's no way out.
Okay, so we would like to have a take-home message from Dr. Coutinho before we leave. And if you could just, in brief, after your take home message, tell us something about the nutrition work that you have been doing. She has a very active and a very practical, useful Instagram handle where she posts contents about nutrition that I would recommend all of you to see. We leave that link in the bio. So yeah, if we could have some concluding message from your side.
So, I believe that what I'd love to leave your listeners with is something that I'm truly convinced about, which is empowerment. I think each of us needs to be empowered about our own health, about taking our health into our hands and not being dependent on anybody or anything or any system of medicine for that matter. You need to know what your body is capable of, and it's capable of so many wondrous things. You just need to take the time to figure it out. And this is behind every single thing that I do as a homeopath, as somebody practicing lactation and nutrition, as a parent. To be honest, I got more into nutrition and lactation after becoming a parent because I realized the value of it and the danger of ignoring it. So, as you said, Doc, I do have an Instagram channel where I try to give equal airtime to all three, to homeopathy, to nutrition, and lactation, because this is the very base of being healthy. What you eat, how much you move, how you sleep, and what social connections you have. That in itself dictates how healthy or unhealthy you are. So, my honest plea to everybody listening is to just empower yourself for your own health. How you choose to do that depends on you as an individual, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicola, for this wonderful address to all the listeners. And yes, we would like to have Dr. Nicola again for the Vartalap on the topic of nutrition and lactation. And I want all of you who's going to watch this video, please mention in the comments if you want to hear back from her about this topic. And like I said, there is an active Instagram handle which you can always follow. Thank you, Dr. Nicola, for being part of HomeoMitra Vaartalap and for uh, spending time on such a very interesting and useful topic with all of us.
Thank you so much for having me.